afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer, and I hope you're doing very well today. Shardless Agent confirmed. Accuracy of the leaks confirmed. We kind of knew it was coming. We now have solid confirmation. Shardless is in Modern. Let's go. This is a very exciting moment for me. I'm not the biggest fan of Simic, or indeed even of Sultai, in historical circumstances, especially over the past couple of years. Blue has not really drawn my eye in the mid-range context, but Shardless Agent is a whole different ballgame. So we're here to talk about will it rock, and what I mean by that is obviously we're not just playing straight green-black rock with this blue card in there. It will be a blue rock deck or something like it, but I'm not talking about will it see play in Modern in general. I think it will. We're talking about can we still have a mid-range deck that has a lot of the same considerations, a lot of the same cards and play patterns as the mid-range decks of yore that we know and love while incorporating Shardless Agent? I think the answer is yes, but I also think it doesn't just slot in to existing strategies. We do need to build around it a little bit in ways that are obvious, and then perhaps in other ways that are a little less obvious. So I'm here to tell you all of my thoughts on the above. As always, guys, you let me know what you're thinking with this card. There's a lot of potential here, and I'm pretty pumped about it. So, yeah, let's talk about Shardless Agent. Will it bug? Will it rock? Let's find out. So Agent comes in this beautiful retro old gold border with the original art, the only art in existence for this card. We love that retro treatment though. And Shardless Agent is 1 gray, 1 green, 1 blue, so a 3-drop for an artifact human rogue. All three, especially the first two types there, are certainly relevant, with power and toughness of 2. And the text, Cascade. That's it. So what you're getting here is a Simic-colored gray ogre with Cascade. That's what we're up to. Cascade, of course, reads, when you cast a spell, exile cards from the top of your library till you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, but the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order. So Shardless Agent checks that first box already for mid-range in that it is a 2-for-1, it is value positive. Now, sometimes the 2-2 body won't be the most relevant, sometimes your Cascade can whiff. I understand that, we all understand that. Bloodbraid Elf is a classic mid-range card in Jund and in Panza, and it has those same fail rates, right? So it's nothing new, but we can conceive of this structurally as a pretty reliable 2-for-1, and perhaps more than pretty reliable based on how we will structure our deck. So, why would we play this instead of Bloodbraid Elf? Like, why is this an appeal over Bloodbraid Elf to maybe play Sultai mid-range instead of Jund, for example, all else being equal? Well, Bloodbraid Elf being a fantastic card, there's no doubt about that. We have a higher fail rate with Bloodbraid Elf in a couple of different ways. Number one, you simply can't cast a 4-drop if you only have 3 mana. So there will be a non-zero number of situations where you could cast a Shardless Agent, you can't cast a Bloodbraid Elf, right? Number two, if the Cascade whiffs, it is proportionately more damaging to your game plan because you've lost more tempo with Bloodbraid Elf by tapping out for 4 mana instead of tapping out on an earlier turn or tapping out not fully to cast a 3-drop Shardless Agent. And if the Cascade itself is relatively low impact, even if it doesn't totally whiff, the same principle applies. Shardless Agent has not been as much of a deck building investment, nor as much of a mana investment that turn. So it's basically got a higher floor than Bloodbraid Elf is a good way to put it, although Bloodbraid Elf's haste is really, really nice in the context of Jund. They're certainly not a strictly better card, right? So why would we play any of these Cascade cards in the first place? Well, number one, like I just said, they are 2-for-1s mid-range decks like that. We can find good uses even for modest 2-2 or 3-2 bodies in order to get over the line. But specific to Shardless Agent, because it is in blue, is the payoff of Ancestral Vision. Ancestral Vision is suspend 4 for 1 blue, and target player draws 3 cards. So you tap 1 blue, you wait 4 turns, and then you get to draw 3. Or you can just Cascade into it. Now, there we go. Cascade into Shardless Agent. Cascade into AV with Shardless Agent. Sorry, I clicked the wrong tab, and now I can't even talk anymore. And suddenly, you're getting a 2-2 and an Ancestral Recall for 3 mana. Really not bad. Really not bad at all. Now, just for the sake of completion as it regards that specific card, a lot of people are saying that See the Truth is comparable or indeed better than AV in that role, right? Because See the Truth reads, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of those into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If the spell is cast from anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards into your hand instead. So it is functionally identical to Ancestral Vision if you cascade into it with Shardless Agent. So what you're comparing is basically hard casting See the Truth versus suspending Ancestral Vision. See the Truth is definitely better on curve. I guess the argument against it is that how often are you going to tap out on turn 2 to do some kind of setup play like this? Arguably better to get Ancestral Vision suspended and play a more normal game and refuel later. On the other hand, if it's a late game top deck, See the Truth is clearly better unless your opponent's bricking for a very long time, right? So both cards could fill the same role. For all I know, you could actually play more than 4 of these style effects. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on which one is better or on how many we should have. Maybe I'll just start testing for Ancestral Vision, see how it goes, but I look forward to seeing what people do with See the Truth as well. The other thing that I'll say that is basically a given alongside Shardless Agent is the presence of Icefang Quattle. Now, it's not totally free to accommodate because you have to have a snowland base, and that's not perfect with Astrolabe gone, right? But Icefang Quattle, very, very strong card, as we know. 1/1, 2 mana, flash flying, ETB draw a card, death touch as long as you control at least 3 other snow permanents. So Icefang Quattle, obviously a fantastic cascade. Off of Shardless Agent, you're already in those colors. You're turning a 2-for-1 into a 3-for-1, and you're also getting a 2-drop out of your 3-drop cascade. So cascading into 0 drops or 1 drops is less tempo and less advantage in other ways gained than if you're able to cascade consistently into 2 drops. So in all of these ways, Icefang Quattle, the perfect companion for Shardless Agent. Now, I think everybody can basically agree with what I just said, but then it's going to get a little bit trickier from there in order to find out what the other best cards are to build around Shardless with, and indeed what the best colors to splash into this otherwise Simic deck might be. So I hear some people talking about Temur waterfalls, and you totally understand that, right? Because obviously you go Bloodbraid into Shardless into whatever, and it's a value dream. Ultimately, without a much better supporting shell and much better early game interaction than Temur currently has access to, that's probably just more for fun rather than the most ruthlessly optimized Shardless Agent list against the broad meta. You also hear a lot of people talking about Bant, and I understand that, because Bant was very, very powerful before some certain blue-green cards got banned, right? Or some snow-based cards got banned. So the idea of bringing another powerful Simic card into the format and bringing Icefang Quattle back into vogue, I understand why people immediately go toward Bant, and you get a very powerful card like Stoneforge Mystic, which plays really well in many ways with all the cards that we just mentioned. However, I am unconvinced that Bant is the very best shell, and here is why. You've got Stoneforge Mystic. Yes, it's great value to cascade into her. Yes, the Agent or the Icefang can pick up the weapons and go to town, and that's all great. But you have to have some kind of interaction to get over the line, right? And if you look at what Bant would otherwise want to be doing, Bant probably wants to take advantage of the newly minted modern staple counterspell. And they probably also want to play more reactively with other reactive spells, holding up Stoneforge Mystic activations. This is just kind of the play pattern of Bant. It's not like a Bant Value Town deck that's just sticking big creatures and throwing everything at the wall and hoping that something can get over the line. That's not really what successful Bant decks look like anymore. So while it might be the most powerful collection of cards that you could play in the Bant colors alongside Shardless Agent, I'm unconvinced that the patterns of play are most conducive to Shardless Agent, because of course Shardless Agent cascading into counterspell is a total dud. It's a total disaster. Nobody wants that. And if you're not playing counterspell, and if you have to use Stoneforge Mystic less reactively, I start to question whether we should even be in Bant in the first place. So what's the alternative to Bant? What's the alternative to white in the context of a Simic deck? Well, that's right, my friends. It's Thoughtseize. It's black. Now, cascading into Thoughtseize with Shardless Agent is not only something that we've proven can be strong in Jund with Jund on turn 4 at the earliest, cascading into 6 discard spells in their deck potentially, and that still being the optimal way to build the list for God knows how long, we also have to realize that this is actually better in Sultai with Shardless than it ever was in Jund, simply because Shardless Agent on turn 3, the discard that you do hit is much more likely to be live than it is on turn 4, and once again, as we mentioned earlier, even if the discard is a whiff, you have not invested as much mana. So Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, I could add Fatal Push to this list. These are cards that are sometimes dead cascade targets, but more often than not, they're actually pretty good. And even if you are not cascading into them very often, they are setting you up, clearing the way for you to cascade into your very powerful payoff cards like Ancestral Vision that we've already mentioned. Now, it gets even better if you're into black, right? Because Counterspell and the other low curve permission spells, very non-bowy with Shardless Agent, but Drown in the Loch is not. You will be getting cards into the opponent's graveyard. Make no mistake. Now, speaking of getting cards into OP's graveyard, how about Tarmogoyf? Icefang Coatl's great value and all. Shardless Agent is great value and all, but these cards don't close out the game very quickly. Tarmogoyf does, and once again, Tarmogoyf has proven that it can be an optimal inclusion in a cascade value shell like Jund playing Bloodbraid Elf. How about this here? Not only is it just a more efficient way to cascade into a Goyf because you're only spending 3 mana on Shardless Agent, you are also further rewarded for playing black cards. Alongside Thoughtseize and Fatal Push, Goyf will grow far larger than it will on average in a Bant deck, because not only are you casting more sorceries in a Sultai deck than you would in Bant, you are also putting things into the opponent's graveyard, rather than exiling them or bouncing them or whatever else Bant does to get rid of opposing threats. Now, on top of everything that I just mentioned, you can play even more permission if you want with Force of Negation. Because it is CMC3, we're not non-bowing by making it a cascade risk, a dead cascade potential. Force of Negation, 2-for-1ing ourselves is not necessarily what we want to do on a mid-range deck, but sometimes it is the best play or the only play that can keep you in the game. Maybe it's just a sideboard card, I'm not exactly sure. Partially it will depend on how many blue cards we are running main deck. Definitely a delicate balance in a list like this. Another card, though, that I'm really high on in Sultai in particular is Assassin's Trophy. I actually have been cutting Trophy from a lot of the brews that I've been starting up, or even some of the recent lists that I've played this month on the channel. But Assassin's Trophy is actually something that I think is fantastic with Shardless Agent, because we have got value for days and days and days in a list like this. This makes me want a few things out of my removal spells. Number one, it makes me not care quite so much about Trophy's downside as I may in, for example, BG the Rock. Number two, it makes me want to have big mana answers as soon as possible, because we can outvalue a lot of fair decks, but we've got to be able to attack big mana where it hurts. And number three, Assassin's Trophy gives us a card that is never a dead cascade. Worst case scenario, they got an empty board, you can point it at their land, maybe you make their mana a little bit worse, maybe you just fill up your own graveyard a little bit. It's definitely very, very live. It's like the definition of interaction that is flexible and very good with cascade threats. And another thing that is a potential payoff, although I don't really see anybody talking about this yet, for Sultai Shardless is Profane Tutor. I think this card is so cool. It is Demonic Tutor with Suspend 2. So you can either cascade into it and immediately get a free Demonic Tutor with your Grey Ogre, or you can just spend 2 mana, 1 gray, 1 black, wait 2 turns, and then cast a Demonic Tutor when it comes off of Suspend. So I actually think this card could play a really serious role in a shell like this. Everything that I've just talked about, Shardless Agents, Icefang Coatl's, Tarmogoyf's, Ancestral Vision, and or See the Truth. Is that what that's called? See the Truth, yep. These are all going to be 4-ofs, right? And then, 4 Inquisition, 2 Thoughtseize, 4 Fatal Push, 3 Assassin's Trophy, something like that. These, maybe 3 Drown in the Loch, something like that. This is the core of the deck. And these cards are all fine in multiples most of the time, or you need them in multiples in your deck, even if it's sometimes awkward to draw them in multiples. What the wrong half of the deck problem can come in as far as the mid to late game payoffs goes is with a lot of the BGX payoffs. Sometimes they're not exactly what you need. Sometimes they're legendary because they're planeswalkers, they're clunking up your hand, whatever. Profane Tutor allows you to play the most diverse and tactically flexible top end imaginable. I'm thinking one-ofs of each of these. Lily of the Veil, Jace the Mind Sculptor, maybe Lily the Last Hope, maybe Lurrus of the Dream Den. Even though it's just a one-of and there's no Mishra's Baubles, in like turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 territory, you go tutor it, you buy it back in Icefang Quattle, suddenly you have just completely and totally rebuilt from nothing, and the list goes on. This actually makes our sideboarding a whole lot better too. We can justify playing the most techie sideboard known to mankind with maybe 3-ofs or 4-ofs of one or two things that are must-haves, and then a whole host of 1-ofs, the very best tool for the job. You might have, for example, 1 Force of Vigor, 1 Nile Spellbomb, 1 Scavenging Ooze, and against like a graveyard deck, you can bring in your Spellbomb and your Skoos, but in the moment, you can tutor whatever one is best. So I'm really high on the concept here of Profane Tutor as maybe a 2 to 3 of in the context of the shell that I just described. And basically, if we build the shell like I'm trying to do here, which is that we have enough interaction that is both not non-bully with our own cascade and diverse and effective enough to shore up our worst matchups, I think we're going to be able to compete against the entire field, which is the platonic ideal for a mid-range deck. The major downsides that I see are, number one, we're not red, and we know how good red has been lately. Red is a color that increasingly seems to do everything pretty well, so we're redless. Our clock will suffer from that, our interaction will suffer from that a little bit, even our hate will suffer a little bit from that, but not every deck can be red, right? I still think there's a really good shell like the one I'm looking at here. And then the other thing is we have that snow land base to accommodate. So switching over our basics to our snow cover as well, that might affect us aesthetically. As far as rules go, there's technically a little bit of snow hate now in Modern, shouldn't really be a factor. But we might also have to accommodate that further, because unless we can focus the list to the point where it's like almost a 2-color deck with the third color being a true splash, we're going to have to dabble in the snow lands from Kaldheim, the common cycle. That's a dual land. It's fetchable, so that's great, but they ETB tapped. You're looking at Rimewood Falls here, and, there's one for every color combination in this deck. So that is a little bit of a downfall, just because these are relatively poor lands that we kind of have no choice but to play in order to turn on Icefang Quattle. But that, my friends, is basically going to be worth it as far as I can tell. So those are my initial thoughts on Shardless Agent. I do think the card is very good. I do think it absolutely will rock in that we can build a mid-range shell along the lines of what I showed you here without too much trouble, and with doing something really unique, I might add, with that Profane Tutor package. And I think that's got legs. Like I said, I'm not really seeing anybody else talk about that, so you let me know, my friends, what you think. But we've got Shardless Agent. That's pretty hype. Let's go. Let's get excited for that one. See you guys in the comments, and I'll talk to you very soon again for more spoilers. Thanks for watching.